Thanks, and also have a few of my teammates here today too. So we'll go ahead and get started. I know we're on the clock with 20 minutes, so we're going to kind of rapid fire, just hit some stuff. We tend to take a pretty pragmatic approach to how we apply Lean Six Sigma continuous improvement at KeyBank. So you'll see hopefully some good examples and ideas of what we've done recently as we've completed a major acquisition of another regional bank. So first, just a couple quick things. If you are not familiar with KeyBank, Key is headquartered in the land of the Cleveland Cavaliers. So I'm sure you've heard some good things about them from LeBron and his friends. So we are now the 13th largest bank in the U.S. after the acquisition. And we've got about 20,000 employees. And you can see our footprint with both our retail bank in red and our corporate bank in gray. So kind of a coast-to-coast bank that not sure how many in here have heard of Kiwi. Okay, got a couple. All right. And our CEO is Beth Mooney. So she's a fantastic CEO, the only female CEO of a top 20 bank in the U.S. So what we're going to talk about today is our program is about 4.5 years old from an enterprise level. So kind of we're still on that journey. And over the past year, we had the great opportunity to really be engaged in a meaningful way for the acquisition of First Niagara, which is a regional bank that we acquired with headquarters in Buffalo, New York. So we had multiple work streams that our team was aligned to over the course of the last 16 months or so. And the ones in red we're going to highlight today with some specific examples of how we are able to bring value to the integration work streams with some of the tools that we've all heard about, but maybe seeing them applied in a little bit different way. So we're going to walk through what was done in our consumer retail bank on both, I'd say, a client and employee experience, change management, change readiness for the big merger. We're going to talk a bit about our mortgage, which is a new complex business for us. We were bringing in a new platform. At the same time, we were trying to figure out who would be doing the fulfillment and leveraging the servicing mortgage teams and legacy First Niagara. So it was very complex, and you'll see some good work the team did there. And then finally, kind of bring it home with some work that was done around our commercial bank support model and how we could really effectively look at, are we really being efficient in leveraging our resources to drive lending results in our commercial bank.
So Deb mentioned a pragmatic approach we take in banking environment. What that translates to is classic tools and methods, Lean Six Sigma client experience concepts, but translated in a way that's going to work in a bank environment. And so what we'll try to do is rapid fire here in 20 minutes on a lot of very tactical things we did in an M&A deal with First Niagara Bank that was just completed last year. And in doing that, hopefully give you some takeaways, very tactical takeaways that you can use. And if we don't go into enough detail, obviously find us afterwards and we can have a further discussion at that time. One of the first things we start with, everybody knows Fmea Type tool, right? Very classic, simple approach around risk and risk mitigation. How we use this here was not for risk purposes, but for client experience purposes. So you typically wouldn't think of an Fmea as a client experience tool, but it really set the foundation here for evaluating what needed to be done for our clients during this merger that we were going through. And really, take a step back and level set. When you think about banking environment, you acquire a company, and it's not that you have months to transition clients. The bank closes on a Saturday, and those are new clients of yours on a Monday. And in our case, from a consumer retail standpoint, we had over 1 million new clients. So picture this in your business. If you acquire 1 million new clients and have to convert those new clients to your products, to your services over the course of 2 days, over that weekend, and now you're using your products and services on that Monday when they start to transact with you. So that's the environment we're in. 40% increase in new consumer clients, 1 million over the course of the weekend. How we used the Fmea was to really identify all the client experience impacts or issues that could arise or would arise during the conversion. So we used it as a documentation tool, but also as a prioritization tool to really say severity, occurrence, detectability, different definitions from the classical use of it, all around client impact. That gave us a scoring model to really evaluate all these different impacts. We ended up with 300 plus different client impacts that we had to look at. Obviously we missed some. Obviously we couldn't attack, abate, mitigate all of those things, but it gave us a starting point. So what we did from this starting point in this foundation This really encompasses everything from a client experience standpoint that we did. Taking that model and now saying, here are the impacts. Now, who are the clients that are impacted by these things we just identified? So some of it was very clearly some one-to-one things. You have this product, you're going to this product, so there's a clear impact that you may experience. Other things we looked at were more model-based. So we started to get into client experience behavior. How do you bank with us? How do you interact with us? One example would be ATM usage. The bank we acquired, First Niagara, was based in Buffalo. A lot of people used Canadian ATMs. Foreign transaction fees, foreign usage comes into play there, so that was different. So we looked at client behaviors and not only what you do and what you have as a client, but how are you interacting with us? What are the things you're transacting, and modeled client behaviors to really focus in on these impacts. That gave us now impacts and clients impacted by those things. So the four-pronged approach really had upfront mitigation was number one. Are there things that we can just upfront abate and eliminate the risk? Examples there, we kept the same account numbers, we kept the same plastic. So clearly impact that came out of the FMEA session, something we can eliminate for you. We waived fees for 12 months. So not fully mitigated, but now we have the chance to build a relationship with you, make sure you're the right fit product over that 12-month time frame before it is an impact. So we modified impact timing there. Client communications, now that we had this model and this information, we knew our clients, we could interact one-to-one through the communication. When you're doing this with banking products, there's all the legal mumbo jumbo, the disclosures around our products that you have to communicate in writing within a certain time period. But now we were able to layer on top of that a specific communication. We know you, we know how you bank with us, we know what you're going through, and lay out specific impacts in this communication, again, based on the model, to say, here's what you need to do about it, here's what we're going to do about it, let's make this a seamless over that weekend. Right? And then two other things, one on the proactive side and one more on the reactive side. So let's, again, use this information and call our clients. We did over 800,000 proactive outbound calling, individual calls, through a series of dozens of campaigns. But again, all focused around client experience, saying, we know you, we know what you're going to go through, and it was really guiding them through the acquisition from that standpoint on the proactive side. And then finally, when we couldn't reach somebody proactively, we had all kinds of reactive programs put into place too, mainly an I Make It Right program, where there was some compensation, other banker actions that could happen when somebody did come in. It was for those risk and those client experience issues we weren't able to gather through our FMEA session, but also for things that did go wrong and people were really upset. We could reactively try to retain consumers. One of the other things that was the good use of the model was, again, a classic tool, impact, effort type matrix, but we adapted it, again, that pragmatic approach for the bank, client impacts. We did some more modeling around likelihood to attrite and looked at, again, client from past data and past acquisitions, likelihood to attrite models, merger sensitivity models were built, and then we had our client impacts where we could say, how high of an impact is a client going to have, and what is the client value? Looked at margin and profitability of clients and lumped them into 4 different buckets using a simple 4-block. But again, all focused on number one priority, high value, high impact clients. Those were prioritized from a proactive standpoint, reactive standpoint, and we went through that exercise. And then ultimately what this led to from a client experience standpoint was not just for merger and acquisition. Now in our consumer bank, we are starting and building up a whole client experience team within the consumer bank, and they're really looking at mitigation, retention strategies, and other programs and tools that through the acquisition of what we did from an operational excellence team through client experience resulted in the more focus on the client going forward. Real quick tie-in to the employee side, we can focus all you want on the client experience side, but it's those frontline employees. If you don't have them set up for success as they're interfacing with the client, then efforts might be fruitless. So we really focused on the employee side as well. Large change plans started with voice of the employee, understanding their needs, their desires, but equipping the employees, whether it was around their products, why key, and all the client experience readiness went into the training and readiness for the employee base as well. So we tied in both the client and employee. I believe you have to have both. And finally, we have to have measures. This is one of our baseline scorecards that we use. These are all the output measures of how we looked at attrition and satisfaction and our scoring both on the client side and on the employee side today.
Okay, so we're going to switch over to mortgage. Joe Serrato joined our team during the midst of the integration and supported our mortgage business. So yeah, if you can't read the words on this one, that's okay. Shows you how big and complex and hairy this one was.
So real quick, as Deb was mentioning earlier, we were acquiring First Niagara, and they did personal mortgages. He didn't do personal mortgages, but we did a lot of loans. So we had a lot of services that were duplicative, so we needed to get them all together. So we had key services that we knew we wanted to keep. We had First Niagara services we knew we had to keep, and then we knew there were services that we wanted to integrate and have a hybrid service. So how many of you, real quickly, just have a mortgage or have had a mortgage in the past? Just quick show of hands. Okay. There's a lot to go into a mortgage, almost an annoying amount of information that goes into a mortgage. Well, trying to set up a mortgage process was an annoying amount of information as well. So our whole goal was we have to be ready by customer day one, so we have to get all these processes set up and integrated between two completely different organizations that were joining as one. So we had a lot to focus on. In this, next slide, Deb, what we did to build this process map was we had to go through multiple SIPOC sessions with all of the different various groups. So how many of you ever heard the phrase, the devil's in the details? Mm-hmm. Has anyone ever heard the rest of the phrase? That's only the first part. The rest is and so is salvation. And what we realized was we didn't have to just focus on what's the process. We had to focus on every single input and output that was going into that process, because we knew it was critical, not just from an execution standpoint, but also from a customer impact standpoint. So there was a lot of focus and attention built into these SIPOCs, and then throughout the sessions, people would say, oh yeah, we don't know where this input's coming from yet. Or, oh, we don't know where this output's gonna go. So we had to say, all right, let's flag it. So we flagged every single one where the business self-identified this is gonna be an issue and we need to do something about this before customer day one. Then from there, we basically identified over 150 watch items and said, okay, of all these items, what are the ones that are going to be addressed through an existing initiative or work stream that we knew was already going forward, and then of the ones, what aren't covered. And then we said, okay, the ones that aren't covered, we had to escalate to management right away to make sure there was somebody assigned to it and made sure that it was in progress and getting worked through. This all got walked through with a cross-functional group multiple times, because a lot of times they were designing in silos. And we had to bring the group together to see what was the full end customer impact and also business impact. You think about originations when you're going through a loan, you're talking to a loan officer, well, it has to go to underwriting after that. All of the stuff that goes into underwriting, that has an impact. All the stuff that comes out of loan origination has a servicing impact. So once we got that all, then we tracked it all. And then what we did is we went over it every single week. What are the initiatives that haven't started yet? What are the ones that are in progress but at potential risk of missing their deadline? And making sure that of any of the ones that didn't have a deadline, that those were called out front and center too, because we needed to know when it was meant to be completed by. And really, the key to all of this, and probably the biggest thing I'd like to encourage you guys to take away, is that the stakeholders were the ones that self-identified and reported all this information out. We helped organize and facilitated the information, but we didn't have ownership in these items. We had no ownership in these items. These are the ones that the business said, I have an issue. I'm raising my hand up because I'm not going to meet the deadline and I need help. And they owned the completion of those.
Okay, great. Kind of the third area we're going to highlight is our commercial banking, which Jeannie Fanning's going to talk about some of the work that was done in that area.
Right, great. And this will be quick and the last opportunity for hand raising. So who in here has worked on an improvement project? Great data, great information, wonderful expected results, and then the business did not want to implement it. Okay, so that was the case here. So next slide, Deb. In 2014, we did a really extensive project that looked across our entire commercial lending organization. So at a bank of our size, ton of people, ton of processes, really hefty operations, and also a ton of waste. And a ton of overlapping work. We put together a ton of data pulled directly out of systems that had no reports that we were getting access to in a leadership level way for the first time. We did capacity analyses and Gemba walks and tons of surveys with people all across our organization and came up with a really fact-based model that said in some areas you have up to 70% capacity to take on additional work or to reduce costs. And what the business said was, okay, that's all well and good, we can't argue with it, but this would completely blow up our entire organization if we were to do this, and we're not ready yet. So to our team, that was pretty defeating. It was about 9 months of work that went into coming up with all of this, and it just kind of sat on the back shelf, and people talked about it being this great body of work and great findings, but it never got implemented. Until our acquisition was announced, and as Craig and Deb mentioned, we got 1 million new customers, an increase of 40% over our base, and a lot of people coming in places where we said, okay, how can we meet these customer needs without having to hire 40% more people in order to be able to do that, or invest in new processes? How can we use what we already have? So through that, we were actually able to dust this off the shelf, and very quickly, onto the next slide, Deb. We're able to come up with a new list of recommendations about 18 months after this work had started, really being able to leverage something that was already done, bring stakeholders back to the table, get some fresh insights from people, identify where we had major gaps, where some things left off, and maybe where our initial recommendations from the previous year didn't apply anymore in this new environment with the acquisition, didn't necessarily meet the needs of the new customer base or new products that we were bringing in. But say we've got 4 major recommendations. We already have the bulk of this work done, that's already been agreed to, that's already been tested and confirmed as accurate, that we can now implement in a really tight time frame to bring these new customers on board and see some efficiencies as well. So shows that nothing is truly dead until it's dead.
Well, and I think the broader thing we do as well is we not only track our realized benefits, revenue and expense, we also track identified and validated by finance. So, the work that Jeannie references, so in addition to, I think we're up to 70 million now of benefit, but we've left like 24 or 25 million on the table that's been identified and validated. But at some point when the business is ready, there are specific things they can look at for improvements. So just real quick, we also put together a list of kind of what went well, if Key's going to go down another path in terms of a merger, and also just as a company, how can we improve our culture coming out of a merger? Because there are a lot of things you have to do during a merger with very aggressive timelines that can't be moved, that had to kind of push our culture. We were a little bit slow and collaborative in some areas coming into this. So some of the things we said worked well. You've seen some really good examples of an Fmea, somewhat modified for our purpose, but it was really effective and well received. We did have very strong and engaged executive business support, which also was a good opportunity for them to see more hands-on, I think, what this team can do and what these principles can do, which has really helped us. And then also conversion playbooks. We've spent some time trying to put some standardization around, again, if we go down the path in the future that we're leveraged during our big conversion timeframes. But there's always the what can you do better? One of our big ones that we are getting support to do for Key is client journey mapping. You hear a lot about that at the conference or any conference you go to these days. And we've really got a commitment now to pilot that in our business bank and in our mortgage business. So that's a good one for us. And also just looking at how we can better centralize and have transparency for dashboards and business reporting. Any questions, feel free to ask us now if you've got time or later, but share a little bit of the Key story. So thanks.
Great.